Greetings, Dr. Wolfula here, and if you're a Friday the 13th fan, which I'm pretty sure you are, then you'll know very well that the hero of these films, Jason Voorhees, has changed a lot over the years. Mostly just in the way he looks. The man alternates his appearance in each movie. Some changes are small, some are quite large, from his mask to his clothes to his face. So I'm going to take it upon myself to guide you through all of Jason's different looks in the franchise, beginning with parts 1 through 4. Let's get started, shall we? Friday the 13th Part 1 may not have been Jason's debut as a killer, but it was still his debut. We see him initially in a flashback being had by his soon-to-be late mother, Pamela Voorhees. Jason is seen as a kid, maybe 11, drowning to death supposedly. Jason isn't shown incredibly clearly here, but we can tell he's not a normal-looking kid. He's got a head like a fucking orange, perfectly round and bald like Charlie Brown's. Okay, maybe not round. His head has a few bumps. His face definitely isn't symmetrical. Certain members of the cast and crew of Part 1 have described Jason in interviews as a mongoloid. Not really politically correct and also kind of racist. I'd say Jason looks more like a hydrocephalic. Later in Part 1, Jason jump scares Alice, the protagonist, in her canoe during a nightmare sequence. This imaginary Jason is a pure zombie swamp thing. Maybe a foreshadowing of what he becomes in later movies. He looks more skeletal and decayed, covered in lake muck. Could use a toothbrush. In Friday the 13th Part 2, Jason finally takes the reins as the series' standard villain. He's on a mission to continue his mom's work of keeping people the fuck away from Crystal Lake. The mask he dons in this flick is a simple bag or sack with one eye hole. It's debatably creepier than the hockey mask he later wears, but nowhere near as iconic. It does give him a sort of scary, murderous Elephant Man vibe, which is appropriate, I guess. In Part 2, Jason also wears the standard hillbilly attire of overalls and a flannel shirt. Not really the best fashion sense, but Jason has been living in the woods for quite some time. Just count yourself lucky that he wears clothes at all. Near the end of Part 2, we see Jay unmasked briefly, attacking Ginny in a nightmare sequence. You'd think Jason was Freddy Krueger. Jason unmasked in Part 2 looks consistent with his appearance as a child in Part 1. He's got some clumps of reddish hair like Chucky as a full-grown man. His teeth clearly have no more hope left. Jason is also a bit unshaven, and half of his face looks like it's been melted. To me, this is definitely the weirdest-looking unmasked Jason. Part 3 saw Jason hitting his stride visually. Jason spends a bit of the movie unmasked and hiding out. He ditches his hillbilly look and instead sports a more styling look with his green work shirt and slacks. At a certain point, Jason snags a hockey mask from a nerdy dude named Shelly and has worn goalie face wear ever since. The hockey mask looks a bit old. It's the standard white with one red chevron on the forehead and one on each cheek. It looks good. I mean, Jason doesn't show much personality, so it helps that he's got a mask that gives him a visually distinct, memorable look that only he can pull off. Everybody else just looks like a chump compared to Jason when it comes to hockey mask wearing. Part 3 gives a few good glimpses of Jason's face. Jason lost all of his hair from Part 2. Maybe it was a wig. He also looks like he got punched in the face real hard based on his pushed-in nose. A brand new feature Jason possesses in Part 3 is a cleft lip, and in addition to this, a cleft forehead in the form of an axe wound he gets later in the film. Jason would sometimes have this battle scar in later movies. With Part 4, now that Jason has been properly established, a concerted effort is made to keep things consistent visually with Part 3. Part 4 has the same basic look for Jason seen previously. He of course retains the axe scar on his head, and the mask looks dirtier. Some of the paint is peeling off, and it's pretty scratched up. When Jason goes maskless at the end, the guy looks like he's been doing a lot of hard living in a short span of time. Visually, Jason looks like a zombie here, possibly due to getting a TV smashed on his head. Because of the melted appearance, Jason looks like he could be Freddy's grandpapa. A little after Jason's unmasking, the guy suddenly has a totally different face seen briefly. It's much less decayed, and he has more of a pug look to him, what with the snaggletooth and the lack of a chin. Not as impressive looking as the first face. Well, this seems to be the version of Jason's face that gets macheted in what's one of his best deaths. Just because Friday the 13th Part 4 was the last Friday the 13th movie, that doesn't mean it was the last Friday the 13th movie. So join me next time, where I'll be discussing Jason's appearances in the second half of Paramount's run of F-13 flicks. See ya!